Thank you. Well, the topic of my dissertation is no liberation without reconciliation, re-examining the cross in Latin American Christologies. And what inspired my topic was that I came from El Salvador, which is a small country in Central America, which also has been a country who has suffered from civil war and a lot of, struggle, violence, political violence, dictatorships. And then even after the peace agreement was, signed on the 90s, after that, the society from El Salvador was a really violent society. People will be familiar with problems with gangs and all these kind of things, and poverty and injustice in general. So I start to question, to wonder, to raise this question, and how my faith and how theology, and especially my Christian faith, relates to the situation and circumstances of violence and in my home country, El Salvador, in poverty and injustice. So maybe the first thing to take a look at it is liberation theology, because liberation theology has been prominent, like the paradigm, the prominent or the mainly paradigm for social engagement, theological speaking, in not only Latin America, but other majority world countries or part of the world. But I started to think, how about if we move forward the agenda of talking? I mean, not in order to, substitute this paradigm of liberation, but in order to, have a supplement kind of paradigm that can also help us to go beyond what liberationists has taught us about the engagement of church and society and theology and society and so on. So I started looking for a reconciliation as a paradigm, because I thought that even in my societies like El Salvador, even after the civil war, we have this, animosity, we have this, violence problem still present, really present in the society. So reconciliation, it looks for me a really, potential paradigm to supplement what liberationists have said. So I start to, trying to do a dialectic with these two factors, these two paradigms, liberation and reconciliation, and how they inform each other, and how reading, taking in mind these two paradigms, how we can read the Bible, the scripture, and see what the scripture has to say ultimately, because as an evangelical, that's the ultimate, the most important thing at the end of the day is what the scriptures say. But I mean, this situation and also these two paradigms in this dialectic kind of engagement helped me to illuminate my reading of the scripture in order to apply to the problems of my society and other countries. I mean, not only El Salvador, of course, but Guatemala and other countries. So that's briefly what inspired my topic and what my topic was about in my dissertation. I mean, I always think that theology and church and theology, or church and academy, doesn't need to be too separate. And I think that in Latin America it's a little bit different, to be honest, like in other parts of the world, like other parts of academy, like Europe or North America, when I have this sense of more separation or dichotomy between church and academy. Here, I mean, for instance, Ceteca, the place, the seminary where I work right now in Guatemala, it's mainly, most of the students are pastors or lay people that has leadership in their churches. So we have in mind, I mean, the academy and the church is really connected. So that helps me to always think, even before I went to Wheaton to pursue my PhD, that helped me to keep in mind and view the connections and the relationship that in a more close way, really, really close way between church and academy. In particular, talking about my topic, I start wondering what the church has to say. I mean, in this context of violence, in this context of poverty and injustice, because as an evangelical, sometimes as evangelical, we used to struggle to how to connect our faith and our practice, our Christian practice, with social issues. And I know that that can be complicated, and especially during our time, that can be complicated and polarized, because in a political scenario, it's really polarized. But I think that the Bible brings us resources, and the history also of the church resources of that our faith needs to be really rooted and really applied to the issues that our societies face. So I see this as a challenge also for the church, and not only for me, but for the church, in trying to develop a robust, social doctrine, so to speak, a robust, social theology that can affect those things. Because one of the problems actually in Latin America, for instance, Guatemala, is that you have this exponential growth of churches. Church has, especially Pentecostal, neo-Pentecostal churches, but evangelical churches has this exponential growth. But it seems to me that one of the weaknesses that we have as evangelical churches in countries like Guatemala is that we don't have yet a really robust, social theology or social doctrine. So when you face topic like reconciliation or liberation, even from an evangelical perspective, you have to develop a robust social doctrine. And I think this is good for the church, because in that way, the church will be more relevant to face the, pressing issues of their particular context and societies. And that's how I try to connect the with the church and think this. The other thing I would say finally is that try to think these kind of things not only theoretical, but also try to be more concrete in the application. Like try to think based on case studies, that kind of things. I'm teaching actually right now. I'm teaching a class on master degree on theology of reconciliation. But my challenge right now is be more specific and concrete and try to use case studies and that kind of things of particular cases, not only in Latin America, but around the world, that how churches, different churches, especially in majority world countries, have faced the challenges of their particular societies. And that brings, that helps to connect or to fill the gap between academy or between the theoretical and the more practical and concrete application. Yes. Well, the first thing, as I already said, is that I'm teaching a class at CETECA on theology of reconciliation. And even though this class is, as I said, at the master level, master degree, master in theology, I have a really variety of students that is really good for me as a professor, because I not only have theologians or students that are in the theology program, but also have students from the counseling program, which is really interesting and also challenging, because that forced me to try to go down and put these things in a more like I don't know, concrete way, but in a different field like counseling. And I also have students that have other background like entrepreneurship. So I think that's really important, and it is really, really good because helps me to try to test all these ideas, theological ideas, and see how they really works in practice. Well, this is one the main opportunity that I will highlight. The other is more like in the church in general. I have had the opportunity to preach on topics, especially on reconciliation, but especially related to mission. So, and that fits really well with my project because in my final chapter, I try to propose like how reconciliation can be a new paradigm for the church mission. And I'm not the only one or the first one to suggest that. There are other people who have suggested that. So that helps me to connect reconciliation with the church and with mission of the church. Because at the end of the day, I think the church has to be a kind of alternative community, alternative society or a community that can embody and model, the practice and the virtues that leads to reconciliation based on God's reconciliation on Jesus Christ. And so that's another opportunity more in the church, setting. I have this opportunity, and lastly, I would say, well, last year I had the opportunity to also give some lectures specifically related to my dissertation at CETECA, my home seminary in Guatemala. So that was also a good opportunity because after the lectures you have Q&A, so you can interact with the people, with the audience, and they can raise some questions, and that's helpful. But I'm still in the process, and I would say that being connected to the church, I mean, not being disconnected to the church is really helpful, because sometimes we as academics can have the tendency, so to speak, to be more in the academic only setting and disconnected to the grassroots reality of lay people or regular people in the church, as you mentioned.
Yeah, and it's such a danger, I think, when you're focusing on something more abstract like theology, to fall into that temptation.
The things that helps, sorry to interrupt you, the thing that helps here, at least in Guatemala, is that, as I say, CETECA, not only CETECA, but even for necessity, most of the professors in the seminary are also involved to the church. So it's not even an option. So it's for even financial needs or other kind of needs. You have to do both. You need to do both things at the same time. You need to be a pastor sometimes or a leader in the church, but also in the seminary. And as I mentioned, also people who goes to CETECA, most of the people are connected to the church. Most of the students are pastors or connected to the church. So that's really, I think at the end of the day, that's really helpful for theologians or academics, because that forces us to really be connected to the church for the opportunity. Well, actually, yesterday I was talking with a friend, a former colleague who's still doing his PhD in Old Testament at Wheaton, and he's from Colombia, and he told me that he was struggling with because now he already finished all the courses, all the classes, and now he's facing with the computer and start the process of writing. And it's really challenging. I remember, and I told him this advice, so to speak, that someone else gave to me years ago, was like going like page by page or paragraph by paragraph or even sentence by sentence. Like, because one of the problems when you're doing the PhD is you can be overwhelmed. There is so much. There's so much so many books to read. There's so much information there is. And, I think that the key, more than to be smart or intelligent or that kind of thing, is to be persistent and consistent. And the other advice that I would give is, now that I'm thinking that I'm in the other side, I think that one of the things that helped me to persist and to go through all these challenges and process and isolation and being outside of the country and so on, is to think on the people that you are, who are the people why you are there. I mean, you can think about your students. In my case, that helped me a lot. I thought a lot about my students, my former students. You can think about your church. You can think about, I mean, this the problem and the issues of your society, your countries. You can think that that is really encouraging, to pursue, to go, to don't give up, and say, I'm doing this not only because of me, or to have a diploma or title or so on, which is important. I mean, I'm not saying not, it's not, but I'm doing this for others. So always think about others. Who are those others that uh, you can be inspired, you know so always trying to connect your topic, whatever the topic it is, with practical challenges, concrete challenges of your church, in your country, in your home country, or in your society.